found them on a Tuesday. Not the kind of Tuesday where anything remarkable is supposed to happen. Just a quiet afternoon in October. The kind of day where the light comes in sideways through old windows and everything feels a little gold. I was cleaning out my grandmother's attic. She had been gone for 3 months by then. Grandpa had been gone for almost 7 years. The house was being sold. And I was the one they sent to sort through what was left. There were boxes of Christmas ornaments wrapped in newspaper from 1978. Stacks of Reader's Digest. A sewing machine with a cracked pedal. A broken radio that still smelled faintly of tobacco. And then, behind a garment bag that held my grandfather's military dress uniform, still pressed, still perfect after all those decades, I found a shoebox. It was a plain thing. Brown cardboard. Held together with a rubber band that had long since dried and cracked. No label. No name. Just a box. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Written in ink that had faded from black to a kind of bruised blue. Some were folded into small triangles, the military way. Others were still in their envelopes, postmarked from places I had to look up on a map. There were photographs, too. Small ones, with scalloped edges. My grandmother as a young woman, her hair in dark curls, her smile wide and unguarded. My grandfather in uniform, standing tall, his jaw tight, his eyes soft. And there was a dried flower. A rose, I think. Pressed flat between 2 letters. Its petals had turned the color of rust. But it was still there. Still holding its shape after more than 70 years. I sat down on that dusty attic floor. And I began to read. This is their story. Or at least, the parts of it that survived. They came from a town so small it barely made it onto the state map. The kind of place where everyone knew your parents, your grandparents, and what you had for Sunday dinner. My grandmother, Eleanor, grew up on Maple Street. 3rd house from the corner. Her father ran the hardware store. Her mother taught piano lessons in the front parlor. She was 19 when the decade turned. Dark-haired. Quiet. The kind of woman who read books under the oak tree in the yard and wrote letters to cousins she'd never met. My grandfather, Thomas, lived 2 streets over. He worked at the rail yard with his father. Broad shoulders. Calloused hands. A shy smile he saved for people he trusted. They had known each other the way everyone knows everyone in a small town. Passing nods. Polite hellos at church. A shared bench at the 4th of July parade. But knowing someone is not the same as seeing them. According to a note I found tucked inside one of the envelopes, written in my grandmother's handwriting on the back of a dance program, they first truly spoke on a Saturday evening in June of 1941. The town hall had been decorated with paper streamers. A local band played standards. The windows were open because the air was thick and sweet with early summer. She wrote just one line about that night. In small, careful letters. He asked me to dance. I said yes before he finished the sentence. That's all she wrote. But that single line, preserved for over 80 years, tells me everything I need to know about how it began. It began the way love does when you're young and the world hasn't broken you yet. With a question. and an answer that came too fast to be anything but honest. The letters from those early months are different from what came later. Lighter. Playful. Written in a hand that hadn't yet learned to tremble. Thomas would write short notes and leave them inside the screen door of the Maple Street house. Folded twice. Her name on the front. No envelope. Just ink on paper, bold and clean. He wrote about things he'd seen during the day. A hawk circling the field behind the rail yard. A train that came through carrying oranges, and how the whole platform smelled like Florida for an hour. The way the sunset turned the water tower pink. He never wrote the word love. Not once, in those early letters. But every line was a man saying, "I saw something beautiful today, and I wished you were beside me." Eleanor's replies were longer. More careful. She asked questions. She described what she was reading. She told him about her mother's garden, and how the roses that year bloomed so thick they leaned against the fence like tired children. That image stayed with me. Roses leaning like tired children. She was a writer, my grandmother. She just never called herself one. Through the summer and into the fall of 1941, the notes became letters. The letters became longer. The visits to the porch became walks. The walks became evenings spent on the bench under the old oak, talking until the stars came out. I imagine them there. Two young people sitting close. The warmth between them not yet spoken, but felt. A current. A gravity. They didn't know what was coming. Nobody did. There is no letter dated December 7, 1941. There doesn't need to be. The whole country heard it at the same time. Pearl Harbor. The word went through every town like a shockwave. Through every house. Every kitchen. Every heart. The next letter I found is dated December 10th. 3 days later. Thomas wrote it on the back of a feed store receipt. The ink is smudged in places, as if his hand was unsteady. He didn't write about the attack. He didn't write about patriotism or duty. He wrote 5 words. I need to see you. That's all. 5 words. And in those 5 words, I hear everything. The fear. The knowing. The weight of what was about to change. Thomas enlisted in January of 1942. He was 22 years old. There is no letter that describes the moment he told Eleanor. But there's a photograph. Taken on what appears to be a winter day. They're standing outside the hardware store. She's wearing a dark coat. He's in civilian clothes, but his posture has already changed. Straighter. Stiffer. She's holding his arm. Not clinging. Holding. The way you hold something you know you're about to let go of. Her face is calm. Composed. But her eyes, and this is the thing about old photographs, the way they catch what words don't, her eyes are afraid. I held that photograph for a long time. I turned it over. On the back, in pencil, fading now, someone had written, before he left. No date. No name. Just that. Before he left. As if everything that mattered could be divided into 2 eras. Before he left. And after. He shipped out in March. The train left from the station at 6 in the morning. I know this because there's a ticket stub in the box. Creased down the middle. One way. The destination is a training camp in the south. The date is March 14, 1942. There's also a handkerchief. White cotton, edged with blue thread. It smells like nothing now. But I imagine it once carried her perfume. Or the scent of the soap she used. Something floral. Something soft. I think she gave it to him at the station. I think he carried it with him. I think of that platform. The cold morning air. The steam from the train. The sound of boots on concrete. Other families saying goodbye. Other women standing with their arms crossed against the cold, trying to be brave. And Eleanor, 19 years old, standing in the early light, watching the man she loved walk toward a train that would carry him toward a war she couldn't follow him into. There are no words for that kind of goodbye. Not really. You just stand there. And the train leaves. And the platform empties. And then you walk home. Alone. And the world is the same. But nothing feels the same anymore. The war letters are the heart of the box. There are 43 of them. I counted. Some are written on military stationery, the kind with the eagle printed at the top. Others are on whatever Thomas could find. Napkins. The backs of orders. A scrap of brown paper torn from a package. The censors had been at some of them. Black lines drawn over words and phrases. Places. Numbers. Sometimes whole sentences are gone, replaced by dark, deliberate ink. But what remains, what they couldn't censor, is the human part. The longing. The ordinary. The things a man writes to a woman across an ocean when he doesn't know if he'll ever see her again. He wrote about the food. How the coffee tasted like mud. How he dreamed about her mother's pot roast and woke up disappointed. He wrote about the men in his unit. Their nicknames. Their habits. How one of them could whistle any song after hearing it once. How another carried a Bible so worn the pages were falling out. He wrote about the sounds. The ones that woke him. The ones he couldn't describe and the ones he chose not to. And he wrote about her. Not in the grand, sweeping way of movies. Not in poetry or prose. In the plain, aching language of a man who misses someone so deeply it has become a physical thing. Eleanor's letters to Thomas didn't survive. Or at least, they didn't make it into this box. Whatever he carried with him, wherever he kept her words, they were lost somewhere between the front lines and home. But I know she wrote to him. Because in his letters, he answers her. He responds to things she said, things she asked, things she described. He mentions her garden. Her piano practice. The new dress she told him about. The way the cat kept sleeping on his pillow, as though saving his spot. Through his words, I hear her voice. Reflected. Like listening to one side of a phone call and piecing together the rest. She kept herself busy. I know that from the town records and from what my mother told me. She volunteered with the Red Cross. She helped at the ration office. She planted a victory garden in the backyard and grew tomatoes so large the neighbors came to stare. But underneath the busyness, there was the waiting. The terrible, stretching, silent waiting. Every morning, she would check the mailbox. Every morning, the same question. Is there a letter? Is there news? Is he alive? The absence of a letter is its own kind of violence. It doesn't cut. It starves. There are gaps in the correspondence. Weeks. Once, almost 2 months. I can only imagine what those silences were like for her. Waking up every day and not knowing. Going to the hardware store and seeing the gold stars appearing in the windows of other families. Each one a son who would not come home. She never spoke about this. Not to my mother. Not to anyone, as far as I know. But there's a page in the box, not a letter, just a loose sheet of notebook paper, where she wrote a list. It's a list of dates. Just dates. No labels. No explanations. I think they were the days she heard nothing. The days the mailbox was empty and the radio brought bad news from somewhere far away. She kept a record of the silence. As if counting the empty days could make them weigh less. It didn't, of course. It never does. Thomas was deployed to England first. Then to France. The letters postmarked from those places are thinner. Shorter. More careful. He stopped writing about what he saw. The descriptions of his days became vague. We moved today. It rained. We are well. But between the careful lines, the emotion bled through. I look at the sky here, and I think you're looking at the same moon. That helps. Some nights, that's the only thing that helps. That was written in the autumn of 1944. The paper has a brown stain in the corner. Coffee, maybe. Or mud. Or something else entirely. I don't want to think about what else it could be. Among the letters from late 1944, there's a photograph of Eleanor that doesn't match the others. It's slightly larger. Taken in a studio. Posed. She's wearing a white blouse with a small brooch at the collar. Her hair is pinned up. She's smiling, but it's a careful smile. The kind you practice before the camera clicks. On the back, in her handwriting, so you don't forget my face. It's a joke, I think. Light. A little teasing. But underneath it is a fear as old as war itself. The fear that distance doesn't just separate bodies. It erases them. That the man who left is not the man who returns. That the face he remembers becomes a stranger's face. She sent him her image so he could hold on. So he could remember what he was fighting his way back to. And he kept it. Through everything. It was in the box. Creased at the corners, but whole. There is one letter in the box that is unlike the others. It is sealed in a separate envelope, and the envelope is marked with a single word in Thomas's handwriting, if. I opened it carefully. The paper inside was clean. Unfolded. As if it had been placed inside and never touched again. It was a letter Thomas had written to Eleanor. But not to send. It was the letter he wrote in case he didn't come home. I will not share all of it. Some words are too private to speak aloud, even now. But I will tell you this. He began with her name. Just her name. As if saying it one last time was the most important thing he could do. He told her he was not afraid. I don't know if that was true. I think he wrote it so she would believe it. He told her not to stop living. To plant her garden. To play the piano. To find someone who would love her the way she deserved. He told her that meeting her was the single best thing that ever happened to him. That every moment, every letter, every walk under the oak tree, every laugh she gave him, was enough. More than enough. He said that if he didn't come back, she should know that his last thought would be of her. The letter isn't signed. No closing. No farewell. Just the words, and then nothing. As if he couldn't bring himself to write the ending. The war ended. The radio said so. The newspapers confirmed it. The bells rang in every church in every small town across America. But the war doesn't end the same way for everyone. For some families, the end came with a knock on the door. A telegram. A folded flag. For Eleanor, the end came slowly. Not with a bang, but with waiting. More waiting. Thomas didn't come home right away. The demobilization took months. Men were processed, examined, discharged in waves. And through it all, the letters continued. But now they were different. Lighter. The censors were gone. The fear was receding, replaced by something almost unbearable. Hope. I'm coming home, he wrote in a letter dated September 1945. I don't know when. But I'm coming home. Save me a seat under the oak. He came home on a Thursday. October 18, 1945. I know the date because there's one more photograph in the box. The last one. It's taken at the train station. The same station where he left 3 years before. Someone, a bystander, a friend, I don't know, must have snapped it. Thomas is stepping off the train. He's thinner. His uniform hangs differently. His face is older than his years. And Eleanor is there. Running. Her coat open. Her arms already reaching. The photograph is slightly blurred. As if even the camera couldn't keep up with the moment. They are not yet touching. There are still 2 or 3 steps between them. But you can see it, in every line of their bodies, in the lean of their weight, in the blur of motion, that in the next second, the distance will be gone. 3 years. Thousands of miles. 43 letters. A dried rose. A handkerchief. A photograph to remember a face. And then, a platform. A Thursday in October. And the space between them, finally, closing. They married in the spring of 1946. A small ceremony. The oak tree in the backyard. Her mother's roses in a jar on the table. He went back to the rail yard. She kept her garden. They had 3 children. The middle one was my mother. The letters stopped, of course. You don't write letters to someone who sleeps beside you every night. But the language of their love didn't stop. It just changed form. My mother told me that every morning, without fail, Thomas would bring Eleanor a cup of coffee in bed. Black, with 1 sugar. He did this for over 50 years. She told me that he never once forgot their anniversary. That he brought roses every year. Not from a florist. From the garden. The same garden Eleanor had planted decades before. She told me they danced in the kitchen. Not often. Not every night. But sometimes, on quiet evenings, he'd turn on the radio and hold out his hand. And she'd take it. And they'd sway in the small space between the counter and the stove. No music needed, sometimes. Just the rhythm they'd carried between them since a Saturday night in June of 1941. Thomas never talked about the war. Not in detail. Not the way some veterans do. My mother said there were nights when he'd wake up suddenly and go sit on the porch in the dark. Eleanor would find him there. She'd sit beside him. Not talking. Just sitting. She never asked what he saw over there. She never pushed. She just stayed. I think that was their language. The language of staying. Of being present when words are useless and all that matters is that you're not alone. They grew old together. The way people used to grow old. Slowly. In the same house. With the same oak tree outside the same window. The same creaking porch. The same roses by the fence. He lost his hearing in his left ear first. She needed a magnifying glass to read. He couldn't manage the stairs. She moved the bedroom downstairs. She couldn't open jars. He kept a rubber grip in every drawer. They adapted to each other's breakdowns the way old wood settles around old nails. Not perfectly. But completely. Thomas died on a Wednesday. He was 87. My mother told me that Eleanor sat beside his bed for the last 3 days. She held his hand. She read to him from a book of poems he'd given her for their 10th anniversary. She told him about the garden. What was blooming? What needed pruning? She talked to him as if he were simply going on another trip. As if there would be a letter coming soon. As if she could fold a note and tuck it inside the screen door and he'd find it in the morning. When he was gone, she didn't cry. Not in front of anyone. She stood up. She smoothed the blanket. She kissed his forehead. And then she walked home. The same walk she'd made from the train station, 63 years before. When the platform had emptied and the world was the same, but nothing felt the same anymore. She lived 7 more years. She tended the roses. She drank her coffee black, with 1 sugar. And she kept that shoebox in the attic. Where nobody would disturb it. Where the letters could rest in the dark, the way some memories are meant to. I put the letters back. One by one. In the order I found them. I placed the photographs on top. The dried rose in its place between the 2 letters where I found it. I put the lid on the box. And I held it against my chest for a long time. People ask sometimes what love looks like. As if it's a thing you can point to. A moment. A gesture. A grand declaration in the rain. But this is what I know. Love looks like a shoebox full of letters. Love looks like a handkerchief kept through a war. Love looks like a rose pressed flat between pages, holding its shape for 70 years. Love looks like 43 letters and a photograph that says, "So you don't forget my face." Love looks like a cup of coffee, every morning, for 50 years. Love looks like two people dancing in a kitchen. Love looks like sitting on a porch in the dark, saying nothing, because your presence is enough. My grandparents are gone now. Both of them. They are together in the cemetery at the edge of town, under a stone that bears both their names and the years they lived. But they are also here. In this box. In these letters. In the faded ink and the creased paper and the dried rose that refuse to fall apart. They are in the story I'm telling you now. I never met my grandfather as a young man. I never saw my grandmother run across a train platform. I never heard the way he asked her to dance, or the way she said yes before he finished the sentence. But I know their love was real. Because real love leaves evidence. It leaves letters. And photographs. And roses that refuse to crumble. And it leaves a granddaughter, sitting on an attic floor, holding a shoebox, crying. Not because she's sad. But because she understands, finally, where she comes from. This was their love story. Quiet. Stubborn. Unbreakable. Love letters and long farewells. And a rose that held on.